Um, right. So I would like to thank everyone for logging in from different parts of the world. And our guest today is philosopher and social theorist Alenka Zupančič. This is personally a precious moment for me because he holds you in such high regard, and your work has always been a source of inspiration. Absolutely. Um, s- yes. Time to formally introduce Professor Zupančič. Alenka Zupančič is a Slovene philosopher and a social theorist, one of the prominent members of the Ljubljana School of Psychoanalysis. She works as research counselor at the Institute of Philosophy, Scientific Research Center of the Slovene Academy of Sciences, Ljubljana. She's also professor at the European Graduate School in Switzerland and is invited as guest lecturer at numerous universities worldwide. She's editor-in-chief of the Slovenian journal Problemi and the book series Ana Lecta, published by the Society of Theoretical Psychoanalysis, Ljubljana, and together with Slavoj Zizek and Mladen Dolar, which we already know is editor of the book series Short Circuits at MIT Press. Notable for her work on the intersection of philosophy and psychoanalysis, she is the author of numerous articles and many books, including Ethics of the Real, Kant and Lacan, The Shortest Shadow, Nietzsche's Philosophy of the Two, The Odd One In on comedy, What is Sex, Let Them Rot, Antigone's Paradox, and of course, my recent favorite and the topic of today's discussion, Disavowal. Her books have been translated in many languages and appeared with acclaimed international publishers. So thank you so much, Professor Zupančič, for agreeing to be a part of this.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to discuss the book with you and the others participants.
Absolutely, absolutely. So without any delay, we should begin. And all of us present here, the participants especially, you can have your questions towards the end of the session. Here comes my first question. Let me begin with a fundamental question that emerges from your fascinating book, Disavowal. So how do you comprehend the paradoxical relationship between collective responses to an immediate crisis and disavowal of the larger, comparatively distant but imminent climate urgency?
My kind of reading of the situation is such that we very often take these immediate crises as a kind of pretext or excuse to of some kind of pressing immediate reality, which helps us to then kind of disregard or forget about this other crisis, which is not simply waiting for us somewhere in the future, but which is very much already involved in many of these present crises. It is already so. What I was trying to say here is that very often we attend to these pressing things, which we should, of course. Many of them are really pressing, but that this should not be an alibi or distraction simply from us addressing this other emergency, which is implied actually here. So I think that the proper response would be precisely to see these two levels or these two things as connected. The present, let's say, if we confine ourselves to the climate crisis, that the present very drastic extreme weather events are not just simply something that so happens from time to time, but are very much related to this other crisis, which is not extinguished when we extinguish the fire at hand, but kind of continues not only to be, but also to grow and to become more and more dangerous and pressing and inducing more and more of such events. And here also we should remember that it's we do not speak only about the extreme weather events that will become more and more frequent, but also of all the political consequences that this will have, geopolitical and so on, climate migrations and all. These are not questions that are these are really very broad social questions. So we should, yes, of course, put out the fires that are burning, but also, and at the same time, try to think about and organize in relationship to this other far within the fire, which is also burning.
Right. So, of course, you begin your book with Freud and the duality between dreaming and waking up. So where we prefer repeated awakenings to the illusion of reality rather than the nightmare of our interior reality, so to say. So could you elaborate on this, because I find this part really intriguing, and how does one really wake up in a society that demands this prolonged sleep from us?
Yeah, perhaps I don't so much have all the answers and recipes as I try to provide some kind of analysis that could help us orientate in these things. So I don't have a magic solution for this. But yeah, the idea here is simply something that I kind of thought about when thinking about this very famous saying by Lacan, that sometimes we wake up from a nightmare so as to be able to continue to sleep. That is to say that there is something, so usually we have this opposition. We are either awake and fully present, or else we sleep and we are numbed and we don't do proper things. But what he shows is precisely that sometimes there are things like nightmares that are actually more real for us than simply external reality. So they wake us up, we wake up to reality so as to forget about this other real, which we encountered, let's say, in the nightmare, in the dream, and which doesn't simply go away because it's also part somehow of our psychic structure, let's say. So this was the idea behind this trope, this metaphor of waking up so as to be able to continue to sleep or to dream. And that perhaps this is not, again, the best thing to do. Of course, we wake up if it's too terrible. I'm not saying you have to remain in the nightmare, but once you wake up, you need to pursue the cracks of this traumatism that has waken you up within this reality around you, which is to a big extent constructed so that it covers precisely these cracks, these traces of traumatic things that are part of it. So even when we wake up, we should be able to see the nightmare and the cracks that this nightmare introduces in our everyday reality, and not simply forget about them. This is the main idea.
Right, right. So on one hand, we have this continuous distraction emerging from our consumer culture, and on the other, we have the smokescreen of popular cinema and speculative fiction, constantly finding anthropocentric solutions. Right. So could you locate some middle point between these two extremes that we could use, en route to climate awareness?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, obviously, because it is, of course, there is this consumerism and the way in which society functions. There is also this kind of psychological feature that kind of incites us to rather disavow something that otherwise would be unpleasant or traumatic than to deal with it. And obviously, society is doing a lot to help us disavow these kind of things, and yet, as you put it, to distract us, or else to put us in situations so dire, so difficult, that obviously we have no other choice but just to attain the immediate survival, or even we don't survive. I mean, because this also exists, that people are simply not in any position to let's say think of the larger picture because of this immediate pressure, be it war, be it whatever. How to balance it is precisely something that we as social beings also in relationship to others who have similar experiences and similar thoughts can perhaps articulate in a way that resonates a little bit wider and more serious than just, so it is again this old but significant word, how to organize, how to present things, not only present them to scare people, but how to actually try to build some kind of society, community thinking about, communal thinking about this as also a social glue, something that can bring us together, not simply something that we have to do because it is, otherwise we will all die. This kind of remains too abstract. It should somehow, it would be good if it became, let's say, the everyday glue of our social, intersocial existence to take care, to try to think about these problems and stuff.
Right, right. So in your book, I love that reference to false memory and how it is used by us to derealize a traumatic event. So my question is, how then is knowledge of the real, let's say, manipulated here to disavow the real reality of of a situation? How do we do that?
You mean in false memory, or
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah, no, this is a kind of really interesting phenomena that several really clever people wrote about, not only Freud, who had this essay, but also Henri Bergson, who has this whole theory of memory always also being a memory of the present, so that memory doesn't only start a few seconds after you experience something, but that actually when it is happening, it is also already your memory. But then he has this theory why this usually we don't see it, and why in certain crises this memory of the present, this déjà vu, becomes the only thing we see. But the way I discuss this is in relation to this Freud's clinical examples, when he talks about cases where people in analysis would say something for the first time, something which is quite crucial, should be disturbing for the way they've organized their being so far and so on. But they present this by introducing this, by saying, but I've told you that already. This is the thing. Even when it first appears, it appears as a memory or something that we already know, that we are already familiar with. That is to say, as something that precisely protects us from the impact that this knowledge could have had in the present moment, to this kind of possibly shattering effect. So we discarded saying, oh, but we know this very well. We are all familiar with this. I said this many times. So there is, if you think about the way in which society functions this day, you can see that there is a lot of this rhetorics around, that people really like to say that they know things, that they've knew this, something terrible happens in politics, in whatever, and they said, oh, but I knew exactly that this would happen. And I see this not simply as a kind of whatever, busting with one's intuition, saying, okay, but I was able to see this in advance. I see it more like a certain kind of defense mechanism. Again, when you say, okay, but yeah, I knew this, as if this would then make things any better or easier. This is the problem. Even if we knew that it would happen, it still happens. And we should not derealize it using this rhetorical trick, let's say, or psychological trick of saying, oh, but this we knew in advance that this would happen. Okay, I mean, this doesn't make the thing when it happens any easier. And this is also not any kind of response. This is another, everything then stops there. I knew it, so now I can forget about it. So it is a very, and false memory as one of these phenomena, as this is called, this déjà vu, has something of this texture, of a certain thing that we see for the first time, or that shatters us, and it actually comes to us as a memory. It
Fascinating.
shields the very reality of what this memory is all about, because it is already a memory when it first appears, and so we are kind of distanced from it, we are kind of protected from it.
Right. So when you write about that our lives don't matter to us, there's a part of your book where you do write that. So rather spectacle of endings do. So my question is, are you neglecting the aspect of immediacy and the tangible relations with emergencies? So what I'm trying to say is we tend to be moved only by things that are observable in terms of time. So though we keep encountering death by climate catastrophes, don't you think that a total extinction still belongs to the realm of imagination?
Yes, and I'm also not even into this idea of total extinction as the kind of horizon of climate crisis. I think precisely, to put it like this, because I'm very suspicious of these apocalyptic visions of the end of the world and the total extinctions and so on, because I think there is even a title now with a Romanian movie with this title now around, don't expect too much from the end of the world. And I thought, I mean, I had this formula quite some time ago, and I was really nicely surprised to say, yes, there are many people who see this and who understand that it is not, because this total extinction even appears as some kind of final release from, all our pains. And what this climate catastrophe announce and already produce in some parts of the world is just this kind of terrible, prolonged, painful suffering, dealing with this kind. Some people dying, some not. I mean, this is the end of the world. It's not some huge explosion in which everything will disappear, at least for me. So in this sense, this is just in response to one part of your question. The other part, yes, of course, we are built so that we attend to immediate crises and to our survival. But nevertheless, since we are also, to some extent, at least, or very much so, rational beings, and also where reason itself is part of emotions and of fear. One can be scared of something even if it is not completely immediate. I mean, but so it is simply the idea there behind the sentence that you quoted was simply that we don't actually behave like we want to survive. That in a way we display, of course, we say we do want to survive, we do things, but in a way that we do things which kind of almost testify to the opposite. But this is not even a kind of crucial or key emphasis in what I'm saying. This is just one thing that I say in a certain specific context. But I think what is more important, I guess, is precisely this, to dismantle this opposition between what is going on now and is difficult and is kind of a final event of distinction, and really relate them and think what is going on. This emergency is precisely that emergency, to kind of establish the connection, and not this kind of temporal also distance. Yeah, we know that things will probably get worse, but they are already here precisely in this form now. So, and this is what we should think about.
Right.
Does this make sense? I mean, does it clarify what you were?
Absolutely. So again, one more fundamental question that I have is, what happens to knowledge when disavowal takes place? So what I precisely mean is, will there be a bifurcation within the domain of knowledge, or is it relegated to a secondary fetishized object, or is its essential meaning lost forever? What really happens after disavowal?
Yeah, I mean, the very starting point of this book is a kind of also psychoanalytical truth, which dismantles this opposition between knowledge and belief, because we usually have this idea, okay, either we are people or societies of knowledge, where knowledge governs us, or we are superstitious civilizations based on belief. As a matter of fact, one of the very fundamental insights of psychoanalysis, and one of the insights that came to our awareness precisely because of this phenomenon of disavowal, is that knowledge and belief are much more intrinsically connected than we tend to believe or know. So that actually it is at the moment of knowledge that a certain belief is established. It is not, the opposition is not simple. So knowledge is actually part of what makes us believe something, or continuing this about belief. Knowledge itself has a certain intrinsic gap, or certain thing which is not, knowledge itself is not an ambiguous notion, or a kind of flat notion with which we can oppose this or that. So it has its own dialectics, it has its own split, and of course, you know, unconscious is famously defined by Lacan, for instance, as the knowledge that does not know itself. So it's not the opposite of knowledge, it's not some obscure, just pure drive. It is the knowledge. So you have this, even this kind of paradoxical knowledge that as knowledge, but that does not know itself. So this is what is important to I think not only think about, but also with the process, in the process of thinking, of writing about it, to kind of get these things in motion, show how they dialectically intervene, and what are possible outcomes or results of different configurations of knowledge and belief. And yes, disavowal is a very clear example where knowledge, not only the admission, the affirmation of some knowledge, coexists completely with the belief in the opposite. So this formula that I take from Octave Manouni, I know very well, I know well this and that, but nevertheless, I still kind of believe or behave as if I did not know it. So, and the two are not simply, I mean, the opposition is a kind of concrete opposition. We live like this, we behave like this. And then I also talk about this kind of further redoubling, in which this first part, I know very well, kind of becomes the very fetish, the very thing which prevents us from really believing what we know, or really trusting what we know. So I talk about precisely this turn when that we were mentioning just before, this tendency that we have to emphasize so much that we are not naive, that we are nobody's dupes, that we knew this already a long time ago, that we know, of course I know this, I'm not so stupid as not to know this. But then this itself, this declaration, first you say it out loud that you know it, and this declaration itself functions as a kind of fetishist object that helps you or that enables you to go on living, pretending, believing, enjoying as if you did not know this. But this is precisely because already at the outset, knowledge and belief are not simply two opposites. So, and this is why it's not simply the disavowal as such induces this kind of knowledge turning bad. There is something in knowledge itself which has this kind of capacity to go in different directions. And disavowal is one of them, yeah.
Right. So taking the cue from your response, so how does disavowal then, how does it alter our association with the big other, or the information circulating authorities, so to say? So if knowledge turns relativized and subjective, like you put it, how does society reinstate control and trust in its mechanism?
Sorry, can you just repeat the last part? How does I didn't one word I didn't hear.
So if knowledge turns relativized and subjective, how does society reinstate control and trust in its mechanism?
How do we reinstall the trust in this? Yeah. I mean, it's again, it is difficult to talk about certain recipes here. This is not exactly what what I'm trying also to do with the book, but I think it is precisely this. The big other, to use this, there is something we usually refer to or relate also when it comes to our most intimate experiences. We have this kind of a part of these intimate experiences and convictions and knowledge goes through this outer circuit. And this outer circuit is not simply in itself false or true or whatever. It is precisely something that testifies to the fact that no experience, so not simply no truth or knowledge, but also no experience is simply immediate. We often like to think about experiences as something which is just immediate. No, it always involves this circuit through which we experience something as this or that. So, of course, pain, you can say, is immediate, but the experience of this pain and to the all the kind of different meanings and other dimensions to which it gets attached is already part of this, let's say, exterior circuit in which we are always in some way in correspondence with some kind of more general cultural, economic, whatever frame of references. So this, though, and of course, because of this, because the fact that even when we are reduced to some kind of, I mean, psychology is clearly something that does not come from ourselves simply, but is the probably one of the most clear examples of this kind of extimacy of our intimate core and so on. So, and if you have this kind of configuration, then of course you cannot simply change things by changing yourself or understanding how you respond like this because of this. This is one part of the work, but there is also something in the big other outside or in the social structure, in the way we relate to each other, that would need to change or shift a little bit for this circuit to adopt a really different form. Okay, this is perhaps a little bit abstractly put, but this would be perhaps my attempt to to answer your question. It is not simply, we have to think about why do we also think so, and what is what makes us react in this way rather than in another, because these things are not simply written in the stone, as we say. They are to some extent not only negotiable, but also can be perhaps shifted and changed by other means, other ways of organizing ourselves and so on.
Right. So I know you've written at length about this, but this is interesting. So you've dissected Descartes via Lacan, and you write that subjectivity is constituted by the repression of non-being, and that is also the primary reason behind the split in knowledge. So my question is, how does this gap assist assist the subject, and by extension the big other, in sustaining disavowal?
Yeah, I mean, this gap is absolutely crucial in sustaining disavowal, as much as it is also crucial in dismantling it. So I think this gap, let's call it the gap of the unconscious, which is also something that is not simply what repressed content, but the very mechanism which kind of functions on these two levels and what happens in between. This gap is not to put it very kind of simply or perhaps even romantically, is what is responsible for the worst as well as for the best things that we are kind of capable of. So it is not, the idea is not simply that we should strive to eliminate this gap and function in this way, function in some kind of a purely rational way, because I really don't think this is of course, because rationality itself, this gap is part of the rationality, and if you eliminate this gap itself, then you also, I think, lose precisely the rationality that you are aiming to solidify or to make more important. So I guess it is simply the question, and I guess this is the basic question of the analytical practice. It is precisely how to work with this gap so that it functions in other ways than simply in this way of leading to this and that symptoms, difficulties. That now, if we talk about the individual level, of course, this cannot be simply directly mapped on the society, but nevertheless, one could say that this gap is something that also, which is also built in the society, or the society is built around, and it is, it can be, sometimes it can be circumscribed or isolated or engaged in our lives in a way which goes in different directions than simple disavowal, or then, okay, repression is another, or denial another form. So but it is, and this is, but this remains a very, very, very dynamic thing. So it's not, this is why there is no kind of final solution, because this gap is the very thing that keeps things to some extent alive and open, and which involves and demands our work of the unconscious, and so on, when we are dealing with it.
Right, right. So how do you establish this almost troublesome connection between a fetishist disavowal of knowledge and surplus knowledge as fetish that is used to disavow disavowal itself? So in simple terms, what I'm asking is, what is the process of knowledge transforming itself into fetish and securing for us this unrestrained enjoyment through ignorance?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting phenomenon that I observe, which I've already discussed a little bit in answer to one of the previous questions, namely that, yeah, not only is there knowledge as opposed to or simply disavowed by our belief, but there is also knowledge, the same knowledge, or the declaration of this same knowledge, that start to function as fetish. Now, fetish, I suppose, I mean, I'm sure you know what this term technically means, and can we suppose that people in the audience also are familiar with this term, or do I need to explain what exactly is the psychoanalytic notion of the fetish?
I think we are familiar. I think so.
Okay, okay. So in this sense, it is fetishization of knowledge is something different from what we usually mean by fetishizing something in the sense of valorizing it very much. It is literally objective, kind of declaration of one awareness or knowledge that I was referring to before, starts to function in the social environment as a kind of stake, as a kind of object that I use, or that I have in my lab all the time, and helps me precisely disavow the very content of this knowledge. This is the theoretical point that I'm making, and I think here, I mean, obviously, one kind of, to some extent, useful and disarming maneuver in the face of this fetishism would be to redeploy some good old naivety, that, okay, I really don't know this. Please, can you explain me? You all know this, I don't know this. Just take a little, I mean, there are, I guess, also in ways we communicate with each other. There is this trap, if everybody says, oh, I know this very well, all the rest of the people will be embarrassed to say, okay, but perhaps we don't know it. So yeah, of course we know it. And there is some kind of almost contingent fetishization of this, unless of just taking a moment to say, but wait a minute, do we really know this, or what is this, which kind of could perhaps dismantle a little bit the fetishistic, let's say, component there, or efficiency of this of this same knowledge, that we are perhaps should not be so afraid of saying, okay, listen, I simply, I cannot say that I know this, or that I knew it already, or that or something like this. So this is a kind of a very simple trick, but I think as societies, it is true that at least in the part of the world where I live, there is this tendency, this push towards knowledge. You should, if you don't know it, you should have known it, and hence shame on you if you say something different, which then instead of making this of dismantling this dangerous process, actually socially reinforces it and makes it because you are a loser or whatever if you don't claim that you are in the loop, that you know what is the so it's a bit tricky.
Yeah, something also comes to my mind. Thinking about, let's say, in a country like India, let's say, where 50% or 60% are below the poverty line, and they don't have access to that kind of a knowledge. Let's say that the knowledge system is completely blind to them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, how does the fact that things are changing, which is also impacting them, but they're so outside that knowledge system? How do you think knowledge operates in that case? I mean,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody is outside that knowledge, because the knowledge that I'm talking about is simply a certain, whatever, cognitive structure, ability, which is, I would say, more or less equally distributed. It is not some kind of knowledge in the sense of what you learn at school, or that you are part of some kind of whatever. I imagine, but here really I'm asking you, because it's example from your country and so on. I mean, I guess people, even if they're outside of the way the knowledge in this more specific sense, like education, high education, or technological knowledge and so functions, they still operate with knowledge precisely in relationship to the knowledge that they get from their experience. So I'm sure that there are people also saying, okay, but I know I mean, this is not something that here knowledge is not used in some kind of a very, it does not have some kind of very profound, deep meaning, but it is precisely a structure with which we rationalize certain circumstances, which can be extremely difficult. So people living in extreme poverty also rationalize these experiences. They are not saying, okay, perhaps they are not saying I know everything, but I know, perhaps they are saying this is how system works. I know how system. You know what I mean? This is. I'm not here talking about certain knowledge to which some have access and some not, but about a certain cognitive structure, or psychic structure, which we call, when we say I know this and I don't know this, or and it is related, could be related to also your experience of poverty, or of something else. So then how do you deploy this, whatever knowledge you formed based on this is then another question. Do you deploy it as in a form of disavowal or simple like repression or nothing like this? This I'm sure it also very much depends on the cultural and social differences, and probably it is probably very true that what we call the West, in what we call the West, this kind of competition in affirming, I don't know, but I knew it first, is much more in the foreground that in some other parts of the world. But it is not simply that knowledge. So I guess the way I think it's not that if the people who live, let's say, in conditions of extreme poverty or war and so on, they obviously have their own coping mechanisms, and society also sometimes takes care not to give them any other coping mechanisms, precisely because this is then almost the problem solved. You don't but I'm not saying that all these social problems can be addressed simply on this kind of psychological level. This is why I said before that there is this external circuit through which these structures are formed, and so it is not simply that we will so if the society changes, then also this kind of attitudes tend to change.
Right,
But again, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I think because let's say for the case of the extreme poor, do you think the knowledge that is formed is primarily corporeal, or it springs from the body more, and therefore disavowal becomes a little more difficult in that case?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that we are perhaps here talking about two different levels, or about two different kinds of knowledge. One is the question, what is the kind of knowledge that globally also, because even if people don't have access to it, it's the same kind of whatever. Did you use the word corporate knowledge or corporate? Corporeal. Yeah. So there is a certain there is something that comes from not simply body, but body in interaction with other bodies. Also, speaking bodies, and this is a certain kind of or knowledge. Lacan has this very, very important point when he talks about slaves, and this in relationship to one of Plato's dialogues, Menon, I think, where he says that the whole operation of the master is not to steal work from the slave, but to steal knowledge from the slave. The slave has a certain savoir-faire, which is to some extent corporal, but it's also like a little bit broader than that. So there is a savoir-faire. They know how to do things. And the operation of the master is to distract this knowledge from whatever, the body, from this more broader configuration, and pass it on as pure knowledge that can then be learned at schools or passed on within, let's say, more general or more elite education, depending obviously also on how education is organized in different parts of the world. But there is a certain knowledge that only becomes transmissible once that it is formulated independently of the work with which it was produced, with which it emerged, as part of which it emerged. So there is this kind of important difference also. And I'm not saying, okay, we should return to whatever this kind of knowledge that cannot be passed on, because then we are at loss, I guess, if we can actually pass on certain knowledge, what we call whatever roughly progress, also scientific progress. It is only then that it really becomes possible. But still, we should not forget the master gesture here, which is precisely not, okay, there are these uneducated masses who just have no access to knowledge. This is already the second degree of this. It is, I don't know. Hopefully this makes more sense. Yeah.
It does. It does. So again, so would you say that climate crisis itself operates as a Lacanian real, perpetually trying to castrate the limitless enjoyment of humans in anthropocentrism, and that nature's concealed machinations have always secretly castrated us in the background, let's say through tsunamis and plagues and earthquakes. And perhaps, therefore, this overwhelming tendency and urgency to disavow its reality.
Yeah, I don't know. The way you formulated this sounds, perhaps for me at least, not so much as the Lacanian real but perhaps closer to this kind of idea that some kind of, let's say, not necessarily religious, but still gods are punishing us for our whatever hubris, for our bad behavior and everything, or nature, let's say, if not God, nature is punishing us for what we are doing. But this is very much an anthropocentric look, that we are so important to nature that, or that we are actually in this, that it is punishing us or castrating us or whatever. I think, at least this is how I understand the Lacanian notion of the real, is that it is even more non-anthropocentric in the sense that really simply it is the shit that happens, not simply, but it happens as impossible, as something that we deem impossible to happen. And my idea here is in relation to climate crisis that there is a certain real precisely that has been kind of massively produced and at the same time disavowed in the development of technology, capitalism, and so on, which is now seemingly returning from the real or returning from the outside in the form of all these catastrophes that actually do have this this idea or this kind of appearance of castrating us, putting us back to in our place, limiting our capacities and so on. But I also like to emphasize, more specifically, if we talk about climate crisis, there are two problems. One problem is the, let's say, finite quantity of natural resources. So the earth is finite in this sense. Once we burn all the whatever fossil fuels, there will be a huge crisis, and earth will suffer and we will suffer and so on. But what is for me, perhaps from this kind of Lacanian perspective, even more interesting is if we were only using up all the natural resources without any rest, just like burning them, consuming them, making them into whatever, something that we use, then there would be no climate change. Climate change is a result precisely of the real that gets produced while we are consuming and using all this stuff. This is what we call the all these gases that are really effective, the atmosphere and everything else. It's a kind of metaphor, obviously, but it is not only that we are using up all these resources, it is also what gets produced on top of our using some useless waste, let's say useless waste, but which at the same time is returning to us precisely as the Lacanian real, inducing this kind of catastrophe. So it is, I think this is really interesting because it is the certain kind of, it's a society that is completely focused on producing this, producing that, and then using all these things that we produce in many ways, or just not using them. But I think the problem of the waste obviously is becoming more and more obvious problem. The real is the waste, and this waste is kind of I would say perhaps the more both in terms of kind of physical waste that we see being flood out on the shores of different in Africa or somewhere else. I mean, this is just incredible sight of all the plastic waste that's being flown ashore at some places, but also this waste in the terms of what fossil fuels and other things that we burn produce. So I guess, yeah, to return to your question, we could see this as something which is actually and precisely the a kind of surplus that we like surplus value, surplus this or that, but this is precisely the kind of surplus that we can no longer use, but that it is now suffocating us, using us, and this, in this sense, this completely useless waste is the real, in a way, we could say. It kind of echoes with the Lacanian notion of the real.
Right. So of course you have talked about Talaesva's case and you have talked about Casanova's case. So in Talaesva's case, we see that he accepts his own castration and disavows the castration of the other. And of course, in Casanova's case, we see that he not only disavows castration but also the condition of disavowal itself. And if I understand correctly, disavowal works better for Casanova. That means for people who deny the fact of the denial. Why do you think so?
Yeah, I mean, this opposition, the way I also constructed in the book, although based on obviously Manuni's analysis as well, could be roughly explained through the difference of the psychoanalysis makes between neurosis and perversion. This is the template, let's say. In the case of Talaesva, there is this kind of still, even if it is disavowal, it is based on a certain kind of, let's say, neurotic disposition, which means there is, at some point, there is simple repression. Repression in the sense of Verdrängung, the Freudian. So there is some things disappear from there. There are symptoms that appear around this, and which can be analyzed, and these symptoms themselves are already compromised formations, which make usually the life of people suffering from them painful. They make them, now I'm really simplifying, but they make them look for some help or go to analysis or whatever, change the word. But there is something which makes their life painful, complicated, and which they seek to kind of work through or change. Perversion is a very different structure because it usually, perverts never seek, or almost never seek analysis, because they feel perfectly comfortable in their skin. They don't suffer. They don't have any, also this fetishist object, they don't see it as a kind of impediment to their sexual or other enjoyment, but as a kind of thing that actually helps them. So there is a certain major difference between a perverse structure, which we could say is, as you put it yourself at the beginning, is completely successful, works better than than anything else, because it usually doesn't involve, I mean, there are some exceptions, but it doesn't involve or bring in direct suffering based on this repression. There are no symptoms of this. They are in control. They don't have, and they can even allegedly kind of like openly, discuss their castration, whatever it is. Nothing. It looks like nothing is actually repressed there. That these are the sanest people, the ones who are the most like healthy. But at the same time, and this perhaps we can relate to what I was talking about before. This seeming health and non-suffering has its price, which is precisely accumulating in the real outside, and which then, of course, can crash them or not, or if we are talking about on the level of society or climate change or whatever, this is precisely the kind of a thing that they cannot really fully control. What let's say is produced as a surplus of their enjoyment. And this real can then but this real kind of has almost a kind of external worldly existence of its own. But yeah, in general, so I think the perverse attitude is particularly in this if it is a kind of prevailing social form of dealing with things, it is extremely dangerous precisely because it protects us too well from certain things. Because we, instead of kind of opening up or displaying, showing these cracks of what is going on, to return to the beginning of our conversation, of this other fire that is burning in the real, and it is, even if we disavow it, it is still there. So in this sense, it is very dangerous, but at the same time, yeah, it works for them or for us or whatever. This is not, and this is not simply a moralistic reproach. It's simply that sometimes if things work too well and there is no real symptom or suffering, particularly as a society, we can be on the road to a real encounter with the real, which is of a different kind. But also, of course, there is always a certain price that others who are drawn into this relationship of perversion pay. So it is not, it works for them, but it does not necessarily work for others who are part of their configurations, whom they put in this or that position in order to successfully protect themselves from this thing. So in this sense, also it is, to my in my belief, it is a kind of problematic attitude. But yeah, for them it works.
Right. And I love how you end your book with conspiracy theories. And so my question is, how do conspiracy theories differ from and simultaneously support the mechanism of disavowal?
Yeah, for me, this was also fascinating when I started to think about it, to bring together and to see how the two relate. Namely, particularly when I started thinking about conspiracy theories, which was now already kind of 5 years ago or even more. No more. It was still, the configuration was still that we were presented, again, at least in this, let's say, Western parts of the world, that there was this dichotomy between the kind of rational mainstream politics and also people, and this kind of marginalized, more marginalized, obscure, underground conspiracy theories, which were there for quite a while, but really on the margins of society. And then they really, this relationship started to change, and also conspiracy theories started to enter the let's say, the mainstream more and more and more. And my question was then, what is the dialectics between the two? Because if, as I do, you say that the kind of mainstream, also corporate political functioning, is based on disavowal. That is to say, people in high politics in most of the, let's say, Western countries till recently did not deny, for instance, climate change. Everybody would say, yeah, of course, there is climate change. It's important that we address it. And then they would organize a summit every year or two, and then this was it. This is the disavowal part. We know about it very well. We organize all these summits, but then in some way we go on as before, or almost. And then so this disavowal is was the kind of a mainstream pathology. They at the same time, in order for it to function properly and for us not to, let's say, see what they are disavowing or that they are disavowing something, was very easy for them to point the finger to these lunatics, the conspiracy theories, who are really completely crazy, who deny even the existence of this. So already on that level, you had this kind of very interesting pas de deux kind of dance between, and the conspiracists, of course, were able to point out, okay, these are these elites who are just doing this or saying whatever, that there is climate change because they want to rob us of all our or stop us using our resources or whatever. So there was a certain kind of, but for the mainstream, the conspiracy theories were kind of very useful idiots, let's say, to say, okay, because people were still a little bit very, okay, these people are perhaps going too far. And so let's keep to the disavowal. Let's keep to the, so this is one level of this kind of complicity, which again is now changing a little bit because I mean, at least in one major country, we have the denial in power now. It's not simply disavowal. This is become the part of the conspiracy theories are part, very important part, let's say, of Trump's new rule. But there is also another connection or dialectic that I detect, namely that it is almost, if you take this disavowed belief, no? For instance, there is that actually they say that they know that there is climate change, but they act as if they didn't know. And in this sense, I claim what the conspiracists openly say is precisely the kind of embodiment of the unconscious of this rational elite, you know, that their unconscious is returning to them from the real of the conspiracy theories, and because this is basically what, even though they say they know much better than do, but effectively, if you look at the result, it is precisely this. They, in a way, their unconscious is precisely what the conspiracists embody in the sense of denial and so on. So there is this dialectic also, but then I also detect a third level of their interaction, which is more specific to one mechanism or one trick that conspiracy theories often present us with. Namely, if you listen to people describing how they became partisans of this or that conspiracy theory, very often they would say, at first I was completely skeptical about this. I thought it was completely crazy. But then I kind of looked into it a little bit more and a little bit more, and then I realized that this is actually the truth, that this is the fact. So what you have at the beginning is this kind of a skeptical thing, saying, I know better than to believe this stupid nonsense, but at the same time, it really attracts you. There is something in this knowledge that at the same time that fascinates you, even though you first say, okay, it is quite bizarre. It is, but then this fascination literally pulls you in and completely prevails. And differently from disavowal, when you still have this kind of, I know that this is not true, but still I kind of believe it, the knowledge and belief here become one. It is simply that at the end, one becomes really a partisan of this or that conspiracy theory. What happens is precisely that now this is the truth. It's not I know better than, no, I didn't know before, and now I know, and this is knowledge and truth, and the two become one. So it is, but you need to start this process. You kind of need to start with this kind of disavowal. I know very well, but nevertheless, I will look into what is going on here, till at some point you kind of step out of disavowal with complete denial, and you just say, okay, but this is I know it now, and I know it precisely because I was skeptical at the beginning. I didn't just stupidly believe it. You know, here you still have the disavowal dimension. I didn't just stupidly believe it. I was skeptical. I did my research, and now I know, not that I believe it now, I know that this is the truth. So there are many levels on which these two phenomena are on this level of society are connected and exist as related, although they are not the same. And I think if these two things, disavowal and denial, are the main choices that we have today, then we are really in a bad way.
Right. So my final question is, how does one counter the belief in conspiracy theories rising in far-right countries, which you also pointed out so rightly, especially those linking minorities and pollution of one society and culture, and the disavowal, on the other hand, of AI deep fakes and technologically conjured historical truths. So here, to perfectly manufactured falsities seem to balance each other out. Do you see a way out of this?
But what exactly do you mean by the first? You say connecting people to pollution. I'm not sure that I'm following your argument.
So
Just
here, let's say in our country,
yeah.
it's mostly that, oh, this is not working. This part is, let's say our prime minister has something called cleanliness campaign, where to be poor is full of pollution, to be of a lower caste is full of pollution. So that is
Okay,
what I
you
think.
mean like literally that
Literally.
the poor are the metaphor of pollution and so on.
Absolutely.
And yeah. And you see, just to make sure that I understand, and here you see this as a denial or disavowal of just you relate pollution to the poor, and you think you solved. Is this what you are saying?
Yes. And on the
Yeah.
other hand, of course, we have AI fakes and technological
The
history.
technology, yeah, of course,
Yes.
the famous Indian. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, again, your question goes in the direction of what to do with. I think, first of all, I really think that they are, as you really nicely point out, that they are kind of two ways in which the same problem is articulated, and they seem to kind of I'm not sure if not balance each other out in the sense of that they would disappear, but that they kind of precisely their dynamics makes things even worse. I guess this is also what you were
Absolutely.
saying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if I may
yeah.
come in, so I think it's more like let's not look there, because the real problem is the polluting part. Let's disavow the real
Okay.
issue.
Now I get it. Sorry, I was a little bit slow with understanding this question. So you say one avoids all these
Mm.
really terrible things that are that we are confronted. It's from the direction of artificial intelligence and technologies and so on, and just say people are the pollution. Yeah. No, this of course is. I mean, it's actually. Yeah, I guess it can be understood as a case of fetish is disavowal. Okay, we have this smelling people here, so we don't. But it is, I guess, it's even something worse or different or related to many ways in which this kind of extremely brutal populist ideologies function in the world, or I guess also globally, when you kind of pinpoint or kind of point to a certain group of people, which and the idea is, of course, if we eliminate this group of people, India will be great again. In the sense, I mean, this is the terrible, obviously proto-fascist dialectics that is behind it, that you kind of and yeah, I see now what you mean. Obviously, and because it is also, I can imagine, so much corporally, so much present. I mean, I've been to India, I know just Mumbai, but pollution, I mean, this is really, it is a real problem that kind of it's physical. It's not simply some abstract whatever thing that you don't even smell, you just hear that it's not good for you. So it is, and and I think this is the probably the worst combination, or the kind of precisely peak of the symptomatism of capitalist society, where on the one hand you have more and more people and their bodies which are considered not only completely useless but also human waste, in the sense of they smell. We should really purify this, right? And then you have this corporal machinery which is actually actively producing this human waste in this sense, not only through these fake images, but also through the very mechanism in which people are being replaced by whatever. The people don't have jobs also because there is all this technology that can do things in their stead, instead of this Marxist idea, which was that in communism we will have much less to do because technology will do part of our work. What is happening now, and this is, I guess, the case everywhere, it's not that, oh, now we have more free time on our hands because we have all these whatever tools that help us. No, what is happening is simply that we who stay employed are expected to produce 10 times more than we used to, because now we have help of all these tools and so on, and a large number of people are simply unemployed or pushed out of the system entirely. And I guess this is precisely why, I mean, this is one form in which this real that we were talking about comes back from not only from the outer space or from the atmosphere, but also from the very people who are already here on the earth, and I guess there is a certain, obviously, need and necessity for organizing this waste in the say, or self-organizing of the waste, in the sense that kind of throws this really nefast balance that you mentioned out of joint, because this is precisely the balance that sustains all the suffering, or that all the suffering is sustaining this balance. So to shift it or push it out of gear, I guess, and this is not only the case of India, I think it's also starting to happen more and more in other countries, that if people don't organize and mobilize on grounds precisely of there being pure waste, but in a sense which does not go in the direction of, okay, then, and we will vote for Trump because he will make us great again, but in some kind of more sustained social way, then perhaps this balance can be broken. But it is far from obvious. Things are not exactly moving in this direction right now. Yeah. I mean, one doesn't see people mobilizing really in this sense almost nowhere.
Right. Absolutely. And you know, this is a completely different topic of discussion altogether. You know, the knowledge also accumulated and produced by ChatGPT, and
yeah, no, this is another interesting what we have. I mean, I sometimes wonder, because we have uploaded to ChatGPT all these tons and tons and tons of text, basically, because these are language-based models. And you should be careful, because I think we uploaded also tons and tons and tons of our unconscious. It is not simply that, I mean, these texts are not simply about what they clearly say or not. They're also about everything else that is said in between the lines, or is wrong, or is whatever. So here there is this kind of entity which surely almost started to behave like a subject, with hallucinating and doing stuff. But this is interesting, because I think it's not simply, okay, these errors are just technical, they can be eliminated. No, I think this is the kind of, we successfully transmitted the gap of the unconscious, almost. I'm joking. But but this is another tool. And how do we then operate? Yeah, I read a very funny commentary of all this, that now all these things are done for us and so on, but then in the end we are always asked to state, I am not, or are you a robot? And say no, even though now we know that robots can actually pretend not to be robots, but then the situation is actually becoming or coming really close to the one in which we should have replied there, are you a robot? Yes, I am a robot. Perhaps this is a way out. The machines will be the human, and we will be just robots, but we will have some kind of freedom through that.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Yeah, so we can take a few questions. Alexandra has three, but Alexandra, can you just switch on your mic maybe and compress them and maybe ask one? Do you want that, or should I just read one of them from the chat? Yes. Do you want that, Alexandra? Yvonne also. Yvonne, do you want to switch on your mic and ask directly, or should I read it out? Yeah, Yvonne is there. Hi, Yvonne. Yes.
Hi there. Thanks very much for this opportunity. I enjoyed this discussion immensely, and I'm very grateful. I have just maybe one general question to Professor Zupančič, and this relates to the Disavowal, actually, and which I haven't read yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And first of all, I'm not a robot, okay? So I may look like one, but I'm not one. But several times you refer to duplicities, like, for example, that these responsible authorities, organize the summits and then they go on as before. And then you also said that, we act as if we didn't know this, that we are sort of duplicitous, whatever the word is for this. This actually defines what Peter Sloterdijk terms modern cynicism. He talks about the failure of the Enlightenment. You may well know in his critique of cynical reason. And he talks about the false consciousness that determines our present days in all of the fields of and all the walks of life, including perhaps, well, he doesn't include this, but also climate crisis. That one of the major impediments or hindrances for doing anything against climate crisis to slow it down is perhaps this false consciousness and modern cynicism, which we also find, I think, as I said in other walks of life, that perhaps in this discussion, we have been beating around the bush. We didn't mention the term cynicism, but I think cynicism is one of the greatest impediments and greatest hindrances for these discussions and the way we live. That has to do in Sloterdijk's treatise with self-preservation, survival, and things like this. And he offers cures for this, as you may well know. I don't want to go into this now because I'm curious to know whether you have any responses to Sloterdijk's or cynicism's challenge for today's world and climate crisis.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, for bringing this up. I think obviously I know this work, and the reason why perhaps I didn't enter these topics through the question of cynicism is double. On the one hand, very true, cynicism is also a way to describe the, let's say, general attitude that rhymes more or less with what I more specifically called disavowal. So cynicism is also about this surplus knowledge. We know so much that we can then just cynically dismiss certain things or behave as because of a certain. So, and it also rhymes to some extent with a certain, what I called just before, kind of perverse attitude. So I think, but the reason why I nevertheless decided to took this entry through the concept of disavowal is because I simply think it takes us perhaps a little bit further into this very interesting, complex problem of the relationship and inseparability of knowledge and belief, that they are not simply that the problem is there, that they cannot be simply disentangled, and also cynicism is not simply about knowledge. There is a lot of unconscious belief that that continues there, and one should always ask a cynicist if, I mean, they claim that they are well aware of everything, but are they're usually are not, and there is this very interesting point that Zizek makes when he comes up with a very nice example of fetishist disavowal, which is the case of a man whose wife was suddenly diagnosed with terminal cancer. She died very quickly afterwards. They had very good connection, but then when she died, he was immediately able to talk about it quite calmly, rationally. And everybody was wondering, what is this? Is he just a monster or some kind of cynical monster, or just, oh yeah, of course she died. So, then they realized, they noticed that every time he was speaking about her, he had a hamster in his lap, a hamster which was her pet animal. So he had this hamster, and then at some point the hamster died. And at that point, the man completely broke down and needed to be hospitalized. Because in a way, the hamster was the very object fetish that disavowed for him the tragedy of what happened with her, with his wife. And so when the fetish was removed, he broke down completely. And Slavoj makes this point about precisely cynicism of many of the contemporary corporate chiefs and capitalists who say, okay, this is all about money. We see social reality is so bleak, it is such as it is, we know it exactly, so have no illusions, we are just like this. And so I said we should always argue this or ask this picture, okay, you say you know exactly how this terrible process functions, but where is your hamster? The problem is that cynics have the hamster. And I think disavowal can help us perhaps find this weak spot. So this is why, but I agree that cynicism as a much more also broader category perhaps than just disavowal is also a very adequate way of addressing this question.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, Yvonne. Right. So Alexandra wants me to read her question, just maybe a short one. So I think what she means, if I understand her question correctly, I think when we're talking about the master extracting from the slave this kind of knowledge and surplus value, do you think that there is also this domain of knowledge which is, let's say, invisible to the master, which the master is, constantly failing to extract from the slave? Do you think there also exists that kind of knowledge which they're blind to or do not have access to?
But perhaps could Alexandra just perhaps give me a hint or an example of what would this be, or is this just is this question based on some kind of notion of what kind of knowledge is perhaps invisible, or it's just a general question?
Hi, sorry, I haven't had my mic and stuff on much because I'm in a bit of a noisy environment. Sorry. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. So no, it's just quickly to say, because it's something I always think about in terms of what knowledge can the master extract, and then perhaps what the master cannot extract is knowledge in terms of experience.
And
that's an important level of knowledge, including in Lacan.
But you know what? No, I think it's very good that you pointed this out, but there is actually one more thing that Lacan says in this context, so that not only did the master kind of extracts knowledge from this savoir-faire, but he also says, and in this way, he makes it useless for the slave. So perhaps, in a way, some of our experiences are not only there is a way in which we could also say our experience becomes useless or do not I don't know, do not help us in a way, at least not to the extent, to some significant extent with which we could kind of perhaps counteract or whatever, resist this kind of spoliation of knowledge actually. And I think this is, but what he thinks is simply the, what I think this refers to the famous scene from Menon when Socrates actually point out to the slave how he knows already all these mathematical formulas while drawing figures in the sand and so on. But nevertheless, okay, mathematics comes out of it on the other hand, on the other side, which then can be, passed on. So, I'm sure that experience is a very interesting way of thinking about what is nevertheless there, because I think this is a very good notion that there is something invisible in every knowledge, which perhaps cannot be transmitted in this way or extracted in this way. And perhaps I would even go a little bit further and say, and this invisible part of knowledge is precisely the subject, not simply subjective experience as something subjectively colored, but also subjectivity is precisely that which remains outside when this kind of knowledge is produced and transmitted scientifically or in some other forms. But but I think it is a very good question. There is, an invisible part of knowledge, which is not simply some other amount of knowledge, but which is the very subjectivity that through which this knowledge is being produced, or something like this. Sorry, I don't know if this
No, thank you, Alexandra. Yes. So we just have one last question. Dipankar, if you want to switch on. Oh, Anita also has a question. Okay. Dipankar, can you?
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Yes, please.
Oh, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Sridatta and Professor Alenka, for this wonderful conversation. I just wanted to know the philosophical implications of the very of the term or the very idea of the disavowal. Does it have any relation to the Hegelian idea of the determinate negation?
Of what negation? Sorry,
determinate negation.
Determinate negation.
Does it have any relation between these two ideas, the idea of disavowal, and because that also talks about a kind of skepticism? That
but I mean, determinate negation, I wouldn't say so. I mean, it would be perhaps now too complex to go deeper into what exactly is the Hegel's determinate negation. But I think for Hegel, this is part and crucial part of a certain dialectical process through which I mean, and here I would say that it is almost the opposite of it, because the negation is instead of being determinate, remains completely abstract, just announced or something like this. I mean, it is precisely a negation that does not go, to put it very, very simply, through this process of determination, but. Because fetish here is not something concrete. I mean, it is something, a concrete object, but the way it is deployed, the way it functions, it's in a completely abstract way. It is not something that determines there. You were talking about determination, not negation, but also. I switched to negation because it's closer to whatever, both mechanisms of denial and disavowal. But I think what is disavowal is something that gets us stuck, perhaps in something that we could roughly relate to some stage in Hegelian dialectics, but it gets us stuck there in a way that we can remain there in enjoying this kind of there is precisely the movement which is completely removed from this situation, the movement of whatever development that Hegel so much insists on. So I don't see a direct link, but perhaps one would need to think a little bit more and
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dipankar. And Annette, last question. Yes, Annette, please.
Hello, and thank you so much. It was a fantastic talk. I really, really enjoyed the interview. Just a quick question about the locus of the real, where the real actually exists in relation to its connection with the disavowal and the confusion about where this actually exists, because and this connects directly with technology, because right now, our sense of being is oscillating in between the actual and the virtual. I'm actually in my room, embodied, physical, corporeal being, drinking, eating, and yet at the same time, I'm projecting my sense of being across the world, into multiple time spaces and causality. So it's almost, where am I? Where is the I? Am I in between in this locus of process? And there is no fixed time, space, or causality. And so it's almost like we're in this space and reality comes into and out of being in various different degrees of cohesion along a continuum. So it reminded me of vertical time of Merleau-Ponty, where the past, present, and the future all exist in one space. So again, we're determining our reality as we move. And so we just exist in the flow, in the durée, in the flow of existence, of process. Does that experience, we just experience. There is no cause, effect, time, process. All it is movement, is flow. And then the boundaries that define time, the boundaries that define reality, and the boundaries that define cause and effect just disappear. And can that help this kind of whole process of understanding how we're disavowing and how the confusion exists, do you think, if we sort of think of our existence as just purely process?
Thank you very much for this question. I mean, it's a very complex question again, and I think perhaps I would first point out this important difference. I'm sorry, my cat is meowing here. Important difference. The real came in the room. Important difference between what Lacan calls reality, which is always kind of phantasmatically constructed, and the real, which is precisely what is the impasse of this reality, what disrupts this reality, what breaks it, what makes it discontinuing reality. So really, it's not simply some kind of, which I'm sure you know, it's not simply some kind of a massive presence of something real, but it is the real of precisely these interruptions, discontinuities of things that disrupt the process that you were so nicely describing, that we have the impression that that we are all part of some kind of fluid process with no beginning and no end, almost, this kind of what also Freud referred to as this oceanic feeling. But then at the same time, we have all these crises and things that keep interrupting us, that keep interrupting these processes, that even put sometimes the whole movement at a halt. What happened at the beginning of the COVID crisis, for instance, the world stopped literally for some while. So there is this dimension of the real which is absolutely co-present to this idea of we are just floating endlessly in this. And I guess the point is precisely that we should take these interruptions, these points of the real as our orientating points. And you also ask, where are we? We are there where something breaks, where something interrupts. This is where we are. Or Lacan has another formula that I like a lot. In French, it says, il y a de cause que de ce qui cloche, which is a little bit difficult to translate to English, but talking about the relationship between of causality, relationship between cause and effect, he says there are only causes of that which does not work. And here we start, I mean, obviously he's also talking about like the psychoanalytic perspective, but you start there where things precisely are interrupted and break down. And so this is just, again, perhaps something to help us a little bit, or orientate us, because it is precisely disorienting. And sometimes we should follow this disorientation rather just than to quickly try to find our balance again. Because I guess this balance is precisely this process which kind of swallows us, and it's not exactly the way where it puts us somewhere, which usually is not the place where we would like to end up.
Thank you very much, very appreciative.
Thank you so much. And here's where we wrap the session. Thank you so much, Professor Zupančič, for your fascinating and provoking responses. And I'm certain it has opened up deeper and crevices for interrogating our strained relationship with the urgency of climate crisis. And thank you everyone for being here, and thank you.
I would also like to thank you, because I really appreciate this opportunity to have this discussion, with the also like a little bit further away than the place where we are. So it's for me it was also a really good, and I hope we can sometimes at some point in the future have some more discussions of this sort, and also getting to know a little bit from my part the context of or circumstances of a certain struggles that are going on also in India and some other places. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. See you. Please take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.